So, the government has been shut down for over a month. This has impacted a lot of people and had a lot of large implications, including SNAP benefits being paused for a lot of families. Also, Election Day is Tuesday, November 4th, and there are a lot of highly contested races, including some very concerning ones that we need to talk about. Also, I have been noticing the last several months an extremely disturbing trend among, wait for it, those infiltrating the conservative movement. We are going to be discussing all of this today on this episode of Amelia Proclaims Liberty. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Amelia Proclaims Liberty. I hope you all have had an amazing day. So the government has been shut down for over a month. And I have to tell you, when I first heard that the government was shutting down, I thought to myself, this will just be a few days, because usually it is. It's not usually over a month. But that time has passed very quickly. Everyone is pointing fingers at everyone else. And of course, Republicans and the Trump administration are always blamed for everything when it comes to this. So all of our social media, you see videos of influencers and celebrities blaming Republicans and President Trump for this government shutdown. But we have to ask ourselves, why was the government initially shut down? And who is continuing to allow it to be shut down? And I know this is going to step on a lot of toes, but the answer is the Democrats. Because the Democrats wanted every single thing on the budget bill to go their way. And because they didn't compromise, they shut down the government. Now, I am the first one to say that compromise, especially in the government, drives me insane. When I see politicians compromising on issues, especially when it comes to morals and ethics, I just can barely handle that. However, in certain issues, especially like a budget bill or something like that, there has to be compromises made. One party cannot assert that they have to get their way on every single part of that bill and never compromise on any of it. And that's what the Democrats did. They expect Republicans to compromise on every single thing. And a lot of times, Republicans do. And many times it's to their hurt. It's to our hurt. But they do it. Now, I'm not saying that's always right. Of course not. There are some things that we never need to compromise on. But the Republicans do it a lot. But the Democrats don't hold themselves to the same standard. They never want to compromise on anything. And this government shutdown, no matter what anyone will tell you, this government shutdown is a result of Democrats not wanting to compromise. They are basically saying, everything's not going our way on this budget bill. We're not getting everything, 100% of what we want. So we are going to shut down the government and keep it shut down until we get our way. They have voted over and over throughout this last month, including the last time being this last Tuesday. They have voted to keep the government shut down. Almost every single Democrat has voted to not reopen the government until they get everything that they want. Vice President J.D. Vance said this in a press conference this week.
Now, I understand that a lot of Americans are sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. Trust me, I've been here for 9 months in this job. I am sick of partisanship in Washington, D.C. But this is very, very simple. Every partisan dispute, every policy disagreement, all of these things we can talk about, we can reason through, we can disagree, we can shake hands and compromise on some of those issues, hopefully. But this is something that every single American, Democrat or Republican or Independent, should be able to agree on. Open the government. Stop this craziness and open the government. It's causing way too many problems. And some of the folks behind me are the people who are dealing with the problems.
So no matter what anyone wants to tell you, Republicans want the government to be opened. The Democrats are the one holding that up. And that brings me to my next topic about the SNAP benefits. So many families depend on things like SNAP and EBT and food stamps to get provisions for their family that they need. And that's a government program, a result of government spending. And so when the government is shut down, that temporarily gets paused as well. And so, of course, all over social media, people are blaming the Republicans and President Trump for families not getting the food that they need, when really it's the Democrats that have been consistently voting to keep the government shut down. They're basically saying, well, we're not getting every single thing we want on this bill, so families will suffer because we are not willing to compromise. So if you want to blame anyone for these SNAP benefits being taken away, blame the Democrats. Now, I'm not saying Republicans are perfect. I'm not saying anyone in government is perfect. But in this issue, the Democrats are holding this whole thing up. So they're the ones that are causing people to not get the provisions that they need. Now, I will say, government programs, including food stamps and SNAP benefits, does raise a lot of questions and spark a lot of conversations because it is a government program. Now, I do not blame anyone that's on SNAP, anyone that uses EBT or any kind of government program for this issue. And I do not blame them for being dependent on these things because there are individuals, there are families that come on hard times, or they just can't make enough money to get everything that they need for their families. And those people need help. However, the government is not qualified to help these people because the government provides for people very inefficiently. There are certain things that the government is supposed to do. Government's important. We need government. This would be just anarchy if we didn't have a government. However, the roles and responsibilities of government are actually kind of limited. They're actually few. And providing for the needs of individuals and families, citizens of this nation, is not one of them. And so they're doing so very inefficiently. I read this quote earlier, I think it was yesterday, and I saw it posted by the Patriot Barbie on Instagram. And I actually think she got it from somewhere else. But it says this. And when I read this, I thought to myself, this is extremely chilling. And a lot of people don't think about it in this way. I really hadn't before I read this either. This is what it says. 40 million Americans are about to lose their food stamps. This should be the best example for why socialism and communism are dangerous. A government who can feed you can also starve you. And that is this whole topic in a nutshell. People were never supposed to depend on a government to provide for their needs. Now, I am not condemning anyone that's on food stamps, anyone that gets SNAP benefits or any other kind of government benefit or enrolled in a government program. There are people that I love that are on SNAP. I'm not condemning anyone. What I'm doing actually is calling out the government and those politicians and economists that really got our nation on this road to begin with decades ago, really going back to the 20s and 30s. They're the ones that introduced this and normalized this in our society. They're the ones to blame for this whole thing. Families and individuals would not be suffering if these politicians and economists had not introduced government programs like this to begin with. And maybe you're asking yourself, well, what are people supposed to do that are in need? Great question. Family and friends and communities and churches and nonprofits are supposed to be the ones stepping up to help these people. I mean, our history, the history of the United States and, Great Britain, our history is rich with these things like the Salvation Army and so many other ministries and organizations that reached out to their community, to help people, to feed the poor, to clothe people, to give people a hand when they needed it most. And that is such a beautiful part of humanity, of our society. But unfortunately, when the government assumed that role, it did so very inefficiently. And also, it took that role away from churches and ministries and nonprofits. And so it kind of just, it didn't shut down the program necessarily, but it redirected it to the government, and then it didn't do as good of a job. So really, we should have never done that. We should have allowed these communities to benefit from their friends and neighbors. I mean, that is what the story of the Good Samaritan is all about. This man had been beaten and battered and robbed on the road, and he was laying for dead on the side of the road. And a Samaritan was riding by and saw this man almost dead. And you know what he did? Because he had compassion on this man, he stopped. He helped this man. He took him to a nearby inn and asked the innkeeper to please nurse him back to health. He gave the innkeeper money and said, "Listen, I will pay you. And then if it costs more to nurture him back to health, to basically nurse him, I will pay you more on the way back when I come through here again." He gave of his time and energy and his money to help this man. And that's what we are called to do to those around us in our community that are in need. But unfortunately, that brotherly love was stifled when the government stepped in and said, "Hey, we're going to take care of people. It's not your job anymore. We're going to do it." Well, then things happen like this. When the government's shut down, people's benefits go away. People don't get the help that they need. Now, I thank the Lord that through this time, food pantries have opened up, and there are so many ways that people can get the help and the food that they need, because I do not want anyone to be needy. It breaks my heart thinking about families and children going without food. So I am so glad that churches and food pantries and communities have wrapped their arms around these individuals and families. But it reminds us constantly that the government does not need to be in this role. And that brings me to a conversation about government spending as a whole. I think a lot of people don't realize that money doesn't grow on trees. Someone pays for these government programs. I'm not just talking about SNAP. I'm talking about, the free health care, or I don't know, just all of the government programs that we think about that weren't necessarily in the Constitution. They were just kind of added along the way, a lot through the 20s and 30s by, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and other more progressive, even socialist politicians like that. But someone pays for these programs. And unfortunately, it's taxpayers. So the same people that are benefiting from these programs are actually still paying for them. People think that they're free or, very inexpensive, but they're not. Every taxpayer is paying for these government programs. And in fact, when our government spends more money, it actually causes inflation. So all of the goods and services that we pay for, their prices go up. And so I can't help but think, if the government didn't spend so much money, inflation wouldn't be so high. And I wonder if these people that have to be, on SNAP and food stamps would be able to afford food and things that they need. If inflation wasn't so high, if the government hadn't spent so much money, and we would also be saved money in all of the excessive taxation as well. So actually, this government spending is hurting the very people that it claims to help. Because government spending is atrocious in this country. Now, I am so grateful that President Trump has tried to tighten the reins a little bit on that, but he's gotten a lot of resistance. And also, it's going to take a lot of work, because our government has been spending excessively for decades. And I love this book. This is one of my favorite books. So, economics can be a very complicated, in depth topic. I know, but my major in college was politics, philosophy, and economics. And it is very complicated and in depth. There are still things that I don't quite understand, because it is just It's very complicated. But one of my favorite books is this one right here, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. So this was actually a required read in college for me, and I loved it because it doesn't present economic issues in extremely formal and academic language. It actually presents them in layman's terms. So anyone can understand these concepts. The chapters include things like uh, public works mean taxes, which is kind of what we were talking about. Like public works, government spending, it means higher taxes, higher inflation. So really, we're paying for it. We're spending all the money that we're trying to save on government programs. Also, taxes discourage production. Um, Things like tariffs and exports, rent control, minimum wage laws. I mean, this is so good because these things are all topics that are in headlines every single day. And we have a hard time understanding them, including myself. But this book is so good. So I encourage everyone to read this book. This is also a book that Charlie Kirk would tell people to read if they wanted to know more about economics. This is a book he would suggest, so I encourage everyone to get it. This is not an ad. I don't make anything from this. This is literally just a really good read that I think everyone should read. Again, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. That helped me to understand a lot about this, what I was talking about, government spending, inflation. But it comes down to this. Over the last 100 years, the government has assumed a lot of roles that it was never meant to assume. And unfortunately, the American people have suffered and are still suffering. And that has been exemplified throughout this government shutdown. All right, on to my next topic, and that is the election that is Tuesday, November 4th. This is a midterm, so it's not like a presidential election, but there are some very important elections. And a lot of people don't vote in the midterms because they think, the biggest election is the presidential. So midterms, I'm not really going to, worry about. You need to worry about them because there are some very significant races still all over the country in cities, states. And so we need to vote. If you have something to vote for, if there is an election in your city, please vote. But there has been one race that's kind of been taking a bulk of the attention. There's a new article or interview about him, it seems like every day, and that is Zohran Mamdani. He is running for mayor of New York City. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, oh, mayor, that's not a big deal. Well, local elections are actually a bigger deal than you think, and especially mayor of New York City. I mean, New York City is like a small state practically. It's a huge city, and that's the hub of so many industries. And so whoever becomes mayor of New York City is a big deal. And the Democrat candidate who won the primary earlier this year, like I said, is Zohran Mamdani. He is a Muslim American, and he's been raising a lot of concern among conservatives, including myself. Now, we've been getting accused of being Islamophobic, racist, against freedom of religion, and none of those things are true. We support freedom of religion. It is one of the principles that our nation was founded upon. I cannot force anyone to become a Christian. Now, I would love for everyone to be a Christian because I want them to know the peace and the redemption and the forgiveness that is available in Jesus Christ. But I do not want to force them to be Christians. I cannot force anyone to be a Christian. Freedom of religion is one of those principles, like I said, that our country was founded upon, because when we start policing people's religion, governments can start policing anything. And so it's not that we're against freedom of religion, and it's definitely not that we're racist. We love people of all races, ethnicities. We are not racist. It has nothing to do with his skin color or his background. We are not Islamophobic either, but our concern is about him being a Muslim. And again, it's not because we don't support freedom of religion or we don't care about him as an individual. It's because by nature, Islam is completely antithetical to Western values. It is not compatible with American society. Now, I know that there have been Muslims who have come here, or maybe that were born and raised here, that love America, that want to acclimate to American society, that want to be peaceful, contributing citizens. There definitely are. I actually just finished a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by a man named Dr. Nabil Qureshi. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think I am. And it was an extraordinary book. And he was a young man that was raised in America and the UK. His family went back and forth, but he had always known Western culture, and his family came here for a better life. And they were actually a sect of Muslim that was more peaceful, that wanted to convert people, but through peace and love, not through violence and oppression. So those Muslims like that certainly do exist. But that's not the majority of Muslims. That's an exception, because if you really search out the Quran and the life of Muhammad and Sharia law, you will see that in Islam, they want to force everyone to become Muslims. I mean, Muhammad told them to kill the infidels. Infidels in their book are anyone that are not Muslims, are infidels. Also, we see in Sharia law, which is like Islam law, we see inbred in Sharia law oppression of women, child marriage, and again, extreme violence. Muhammad was an extremely violent man. And actually, the word Islam itself means peace. But if you really research it, the Arabic root word for peace is the same root word as submission. True traditional Muslims believe that peace comes through everyone submitting to Islam. And most of them will use force and violence to do so. Now, again, not all Muslims. There are a lot of peaceful Muslims, but lately we have been seeing a lot of radical Muslims trying to take over our country. And again, it's not that we're against legal immigrants or freedom of religion. It's that this is a religion of violence, threatening the very safety of our nation. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, Zohran Mamdani isn't like that. He's an American Muslim. Well, I just want to remind you that just a few short months ago, he refused to just come out and condemn the phrase, globalize the intifada. I want to remind you that before he became a New York General Assemblyman, he was actually a rapper in a band called Cardamom. And they sang songs praising Islamic terrorists who perpetrated violence on those they would consider infidels. They literally sang a rap song about that. He has said other very concerning things, and he released an ad recently where he downplayed the attacks of 9/11 by making out his family or other Muslims to be the victims. And I know that some peaceful Muslims were victimized throughout that time, and that is extremely terrible. I don't want anyone to be a victim of violence. But he was even saying that, people were a little skittish around them. He needs to understand why. And I'm not saying that was not hard for them. I'm sure it was extremely hard. But he needs to understand that Americans did not know what to think after those 9/11 attacks. It wasn't that they were racist or Islamophobic. It was that they didn't know what to think. They didn't know if they could trust Muslims because of what had just happened. And instead of, reflecting on the attacks of 9/11 and mourning that, and maybe even trying to say, I'm not that kind of Muslim. No, he tries to victimize himself and other people. And that was an extreme disservice to New Yorkers and Americans as a whole, because that was an extremely horrible day. I would have rathered him not even address that issue at all than try to twist it in a way that probably really hurt a lot of people that were victims of that day or had family members that were victims of that day. He has proven that he leans toward radical Islam. This is extremely dangerous for our nation. Again, not because he's another skin color, not because he's another religion, but because what that religion is and what he has proven that his ideals are. Because Sharia law, Islamic law, is not compatible with Western values. It's built on violence and oppression. It's not compatible. And so I ask you, I implore you, if you live in New York City, please do not vote for Zohran Mamdani. Yes, he is a human being with dignity and value, created in the image of God. But that doesn't mean he needs to be mayor of New York City. It will be extremely detrimental for New York City if he becomes the mayor. So please pray also for the election on Tuesday, because there are a lot of other races that are also extremely concerning. Please pray that men and women of God and men and women that love America, love the Constitution, love traditional values, are patriotic, people that will be good leaders for our nation and our cities and our states will be elected. And if you have an election to vote in, please get out and vote. Even though it's a midterm, you cannot sit out. The future of our communities rest upon this. You know, so many societies that went before us didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have that privilege of voting. They lived under a king or a queen, and they had no say over who their leaders were. We are extremely blessed in America to be able to vote. So please do not take that for granted and use that right. So this brings me to my next point. A few months ago, I began observing a very concerning trend, mostly on social media, or that's how I found out about it. But I started seeing all of these posts on X by all of these individuals that were real individuals. Now, maybe some of them were bots, but a lot of them were actually real individuals. And I started seeing all these weird posts from people claiming to be conservative, claiming to be Republican, even claiming to be MAGA. And they were saying things like, we shouldn't let Jews in American society, or saying very horrible things about African American people or people of other minorities, or saying bad things about legal immigration. Now, I am against illegal immigration. I believe you should go through the proper channels and get screened and all of that. But I think if you go through those proper channels, you should be welcome to our nation. I mean, that's always been an American ideal and principle. But they started saying really bad things about legal immigrants too, and saying things like we need to have an only white society, and saying things like the Holocaust didn't really happen and Hitler wasn't really that bad of a guy. And I was like, wait a second. What am I even seeing right now? And it wasn't like one or two people, a lot of people claiming to be conservative, Republican, and MAGA. And I thought to myself, as a conservative, this is extremely disturbing. As just a human being, it's very disturbing and concerning to see things like this, to read posts like this, but especially when those people are claiming to be in your camp and you're like, you could not be more different from me. You are a racist, you are a Jew hater, you are a Holocaust denier, and a lot of them are actually extremely sexist too. And I don't mean that in the feminist way. I mean actually sexist, like saying very horrible things about women. And I was blown away. I didn't even know there were a lot of people that existed like this. I knew some did. There's always racist individuals and sexist individuals and people that say crazy things, but like a large group, I had no idea. And I just want to make one thing clear. These people are not conservative. They're not MAGA. And I don't even know if they're Republicans, but they're definitely not conservatives. They are infiltrators. They do not represent us, and we will not link arms with them. We do not hate people. We are not racist, and we are definitely not Holocaust deniers or Hitler lovers. And I know the left loves to label conservatives and Republicans as that, but we are not. And that is not a representative of all of us. Mainstream Republicans and conservatives and Trump supporters are not like this. This is a faction of people that's just kind of recently started rising, and they're the ones that have shifted. So anyway, it's extremely disturbing. And I came upon this individual who kind of seemed to be the ringleader of all of it. He has an X account with 1 million followers. He has his own Rumble channel, and it just has a lot of followers. His name is Nick Fuentes. And I'm ashamed to say I just heard about him a few months ago, not because he's a good guy, but because he's been around for a while, and we need to know about these things so we can speak out against them. And I just found out about him a couple months ago, but he seems to be the ringleader of them all. And I went down this rabbit hole of researching him and just listening to certain parts of his channel. I was disgusted. I mean, this young man, he's 27 years old, just a year older than me, and he literally uses the N-word on a regular basis. He says despicable things about African American people and people of really all races and ethnicities. He says terrible things about women. He literally has said, or even sang a little jingle about how Hitler was a cool guy. This is despicable. This is disgusting. It's insane to me that he has 1 million followers. And frankly, it's very concerning that he has 1 million followers. Now, I'm all for freedom of speech. I'm not for canceling people. But I feel like when it gets to this point, people need to have the discretion and discernment to say, maybe we're not going to follow him. Maybe we're not going to listen to him. And maybe we're not going to platform him. Because when you have a show, a podcast, a radio show, you have the freedom to choose who you platform. And you have the freedom to choose not to platform certain people. Well, you may have recognized Nick Fuentes' name because Tucker Carlson had him as a guest on his show last week. Tucker Carlson platformed this despicable young man who has said all these things that I just said and way more. Why would Tucker Carlson give this man a microphone to spew all of his nonsense? Now, I'm not saying Tucker Carlson agreed with every single thing that Nick Fuentes said or everything he stands for, but it's extremely disturbing that he would even platform him. And I have been very outspoken on my social media about Tucker Carlson. I used to be a fan, like years ago when he was a Fox News commentator, I was a fan. And even when he first left, I was like, oh, wow, he's on a good track. But the last year or so, I'm sorry, but he has gone off the rails. I mean, every single episode of his show, it seems like, is bashing Israel. Now, I am not saying that Israel is a perfect nation, that the Israeli government does everything perfectly. No nation is perfect. No people group is perfect. No individual is perfect, not the United States either. But most of the things that Israel and the IDF is blamed for are actually just propaganda made up to push a certain narrative. And so when there's a podcaster that every single episode is about bashing Israel and about how wicked and vile Israel is, and a lot of it's made up, that's concerning. But I didn't think Tucker Carlson would still platform a guy like Nick Fuentes. And it's extremely concerning that this has become normalized because in platforming him, Tucker Carlson has almost made Nick Fuentes and his message normal. Because Tucker Carlson, because of his past of being a Fox News host and everything, he still has a big following. He's still seen as somewhat normal and mainstream. And so having someone like this young man is normalizing it, especially among conservatives and Republicans and those that support President Trump. Now, again, that doesn't define the majority of Trump supporters and Republicans and conservatives, but it's platforming it, it's accepting it and normalizing it, making it seem like this is acceptable, and this is not acceptable. And let me be clear, I will never unite with anyone who hates Jews, who hates women, who hates people of other ethnicities and races, who says things that like Hitler's cool or that the Holocaust didn't happen. I will never unite with anyone like that. And whether they claim to be conservative or not, they are not conservative. They are infiltrators. And Nick Fuentes knew he was an infiltrator. He said terrible things about Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA when Charlie was still alive. And he said an extremely provocative, in an angry way, video, using obscene language. He basically told Charlie that on his show. He wasn't on Charlie's show. He was just doing his own show, but he was like, listen, Charlie, we've infiltrated Turning Point USA. We've taken it over. And he used a lot more colorful language, but that's concerning. Because Charlie Kirk was a conservative. He was a Republican. He was a Trump supporter, but most importantly, he was a follower of Christ. And everything that he said and everything he did, even the hard things, even the things people didn't want to hear, he told them with conviction, in truth, but also with love. And he always shared the gospel with people. Nick Fuentes, on the other hand, just basically cusses everyone out on his show, says the most horrible, demeaning, dehumanizing things. And he didn't like the way Charlie did things because Charlie was right. And he said that he wanted to infiltrate Turning Point USA and that he was doing so. And I don't know if he did that or not. But my point is, he's not conservative. He is an infiltrator, and people like him are infiltrators. And Tucker Carlson should be ashamed for platforming someone like him and, in essence, normalizing that despicable, ungodly, and even, yes, demonic behavior. That should never be accepted. And I am so grateful that people are using their voices to call out Tucker Carlson. This is not cancel culture, okay? People have the freedom to call out people that they want to call out. They have the freedom to say, hey, I don't want to listen to your show anymore. And Tucker Carlson had the freedom to say, I might not want to platform this young man because all he does is say disgusting, vile things. You can choose not to platform people like that. And so I'm just seeing a lot of very concerning things in the conservative movement, in the Republican Party, and in those that claim to be MAGA. And again, I don't think it's the majority of them. I don't think it's the majority of us. But the fact that it's growing in numbers at all is extremely concerning. And the whole Young Republican group chat that was leaked earlier in October is also an extremely concerning sign of this. And I know there's always the possibility that they could be fake because, the legacy media loves to make up things to make conservatives look bad. But honestly, with Nick Fuentes and a lot of people that follow him, I wouldn't doubt if it was true. Because again, they admitted they're infiltrating and they're doing so. So I wouldn't doubt it. And he has 1 million followers on X. So I wouldn't doubt if those people that spouted his ideals were, if that text was true. I wouldn't doubt it at all. And so a lot of conservatives and a lot of Republicans refused to condemn those texts because they thought, well, they're other Republicans, or it wasn't as bad as some things Democrats say, or which I believe it was, but they excused it that way and said, we're not going to condemn these things. But thank the Lord for the conservatives and Republicans, including myself, that said, yes, we can condemn these things. We need to condemn evil no matter where it comes from, no matter who it comes from. And Republicans and conservatives need to do that. It's not being divisive. It's calling out evil where we need to call it out, because a lot of conservatives claim to be Christians, and we are called to call out evil no matter where it's coming from. Jesus certainly did that. And so I wouldn't doubt if those texts were true because of Nick Fuentes and all of his followers. And again, that does not define the majority of us Republicans and conservatives. But the fact that exists at all is extremely concerning. Our party is being infiltrated. The conservative movement is being infiltrated. And we need to be careful. One of the things that Nick Fuentes said on Tucker Carlson's show was also extremely concerning. And the fact that Tucker Carlson he pushed back a little bit, but not very much, was very concerning Take a look.
So it was like late December. It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin's?
Mm-hmm. I was an admirer, but we don't need to go into that. I guess.
Well, that's okay. Let's get back. We'll circle back to that.
It was weird because the reason I mentioned that, it was almost like because I woke up that day and I was like, oh, it's December 18th. And I was just like very acutely aware of like today's like a strange day.
So now we have a young man who is literally saying he is a fan of Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, who literally killed over 100,000 people, who would load people that were either races or ethnicities he didn't like or that were political dissidents. He would load them into train cars and take those trains into Siberia where it's freezing cold and leave them there. And they would freeze to death. Who had the gulags, basically like the concentration labor camps where people were tortured and imprisoned and killed. I mean, this man was a monster. Joseph Stalin was a monster. And Nick Fuentes said that he was an admirer of Joseph Stalin. And Tucker Carlson said, we'll circle back to that. Yeah, I think you need to say something at that moment. Like, oh, wow, that's despicable. Do you understand who Joseph Stalin is? And the fact that he didn't do that, again, is just so beyond me why he wouldn't. And so concerning. We are called in the Bible to be wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves. So we're not supposed to be hateful or violent, of course, but we are supposed to be wise. We are supposed to use discernment and discretion and to be choosy about who we choose to link arms with, who we choose to platform. That's one of the freedoms we have. We can make our own decisions. And so please be warned about Nick Fuentes, but honestly, this larger movement that is infiltrating the conservative movement right now. They don't adhere to conservative values, and they are not conservative, but they are infiltrating because they have a deeper agenda. And it honestly is kind of a form of Marxism. It really is, because it's totalitarian, it's quiet dissent, it's racist, it's identity politics. It's a form of Marxism, but they claim to be conservative, but they're not. So please be as wise as serpents, as harmless as doves. I know that these were some very extremely complicated, sometimes heavy conversations today, but they're ones we need to have because our society right now is a mess. There is upheaval about something different every single day. So we are called to be informed. We are called to stand up and do what is right. And you know what? At the end of the day, we know who wins this battle, and it is Jesus Christ. We know what happens in the end. He will get all the honor and glory and praise. And the Bible says that every knee shall bow and confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. So do not lose heart. Stay strong, do what's right, stand for truth, speak truth, don't back down, but never lose hope. Hope is found in Jesus Christ, and in Him we can find strength and truth for all the days ahead. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Amelia Proclaims Liberty. Please share this with your friends that would enjoy it or maybe need to hear this. Subscribe to my show and even leave a rating and review to encourage other people to listen. Until next time, thank you so much for joining Amelia Proclaims Liberty.